You can probably hear the heater rattling behind me, that hum, and the rain on the glass. My name's Robert Smith. I'm 43 now. Most of this happened back in October 2014, up by Spirit Lake on the north side of Mount St. Helens. Damp, gray, everything smelling like wet cedar and cold ash. I had a little A-frame cabin near the water and a 3-year-old boy who thought every rock was a treasure. One afternoon, I took a picture of him in the yard, just one. Sun breaking through the clouds, his red jacket bright against the dark trees. Perfect, normal dad moment. A week later, I went to frame that photo. That's when everything tilted. I shouldn't be telling this. But it's been 10 years, and I still hear those 3 knocks on the wall some nights. And I still whisper the word Bigfoot like I'm saying somebody's name. You can picture it easy. Gray water, low clouds, the kind that hang in strips on the tree line. The cabin sat maybe 40 yards from the shore, wood deck facing the lake. Inside, the fridge hummed, the little baseboard heaters ticked on and off. I was wiping peanut butter off my boy's face while the kettle whistled. His name's Noah. 3 years old, curls stuck to his forehead, wearing this bright red rain jacket my wife bought before it was just us. Old AM radio fuzzed on the counter, some local call-in show from Longview. A guy was talking about that Bigfoot up past Randall, swearing he'd heard howls all summer. The host laughed, callers laughed. I rolled my eyes and turned it down. "Monsters, Daddy?" Noah asked. "No monsters," I told him. "People just like Bigfoot stories." I didn't know then that 3 knocks would be the first thing to take that word out of the radio and into our walls. Outside, the drizzle turned the gravel dark and shiny. Water dripped from the roof edge in a steady line. The smell of wet cedar came through the screens, mixed with wood smoke from someone's chimney up the road. Everything felt ordinary, safe. The kind of afternoon where you don't check the locks or wonder what's watching from the timber. Noah climbed down from his chair and pressed his nose to the window, breath fogging the glass. The lake looked like hammered steel under the clouds. I poured my coffee and stood behind him, one hand on his small shoulder. We stayed like that for a while, just watching the water and the mist move through the trees. I remember thinking this was enough. This quiet. This simple. The radio kept talking, voices rising and falling, but I'd stopped listening. You can hear the cooler doors in that little gas station store if you close your eyes. Shh, clunk. The soda fridge buzzing. Country music low on a bad speaker. I was grabbing milk, propane, the usual, when Earl behind the counter nodded at my flannel and said, "You out by Spirit Lake, right? You hear any of that Bigfoot talk up there?" He said it casual, counting change, fluorescent lights buzzing overhead. I told him, "Just the radio stuff. I don't go for Bigfoot stories." He chuckled. Yeah. Forest plays tricks. Coyotes, wind in the slash. Folks want a Bigfoot, they'll see a Bigfoot." On the drive back, wipers squeaking, I kept replaying that, how he said it twice, like saying it again pinned it down. Bigfoot as joke, as rumor. The truck rattled over the gravel, branches scraping the sides where the road narrowed. Somewhere off to the left, I could hear the lake through the trees, that low slap of water on stones. The sky had gone darker, pressing down. By the time I pulled up to the cabin, the first fat drops were hitting the windshield. I grabbed the bags and ran for the porch. Inside, Noah had built a fort out of couch cushions. The cabin smelled like crayons and the faint char from last night's fire. I put the milk away and started dinner while he played. The rain picked up, drumming on the metal roof, and the temperature dropped fast. I could feel the cold seeping through the walls. After we ate, I got him ready for bed, read him 2 books about trains, and watched his eyes get heavy. That night, lying in bed, I thought I heard one soft knock on the outer wall under the wind, and I told myself it was just a loose board. You can see the shot in your head before I even describe it. The rain had stopped. Steam rose off the gravel like breath. The sky finally broke open, a pale strip of sun sliding under the clouds. The trees went almost black against it, moss glowing this deep, damp green. Noah was in the yard with his yellow plastic dump truck, pushing rocks in circles. You could hear little stones crunch under the plastic wheels and the soft lap of water at the shore. Somewhere far off, a chainsaw, then silence again. "Hey, buddy, look at me," I said, fishing my old smartphone out of my pocket. He turned, cheeks pink from the cold, red jacket zipped up crooked. I snapped one picture, just one. There was a faint smell of wet dirt and wood smoke from our chimney. Ordinary. Warm. The light was perfect, that golden hour photographers talk about. Noah grinned at me, gap-toothed and muddy. I checked the photo on my screen and smiled. Good one. I'd print it in town, maybe put it on the fridge. Make this place feel more like a home and less like where we'd ended up after everything fell apart. No sounds out of place, no knocks, no footsteps in the brush. The lake was calm, reflecting that strip of sky. A pair of jays argued in the cedars. Normal. If someone had said Bigfoot to me right then, I would have laughed. I had no idea that same picture would be the reason I started checking the locks twice every night, listening for 3 knocks I hadn't heard yet. Noah went back to his trucks and I stood there a minute longer, hands in my pockets, breathing in the wet air and the wood smoke. The sun slipped back behind the clouds and the shadows came back, long and cool across the yard. Rain was ticking on the metal roof, steady, like a slow drum. The cabin smelled like tomato soup and damp socks. Noah was asleep in the loft, little snores drifting down through the boards. I'd driven into town that morning and used the drugstore kiosk to print a few photos, just trying to be a normal dad, you know? Put a picture on the fridge, pretend it was all how it used to be. That night I sat at the pine table under the yellow lamp, flipping through the glossy prints. When I got to the one of Noah in the red jacket, I smiled first, his grin, the dark timber behind him. Then my eyes drifted over his shoulder. There was something in the tree line, not a shape you could outline in a courtroom, but a vertical darkness that wasn't tree, a suggestion of a shoulder above his head, where no branch should be. I squinted, brought it closer to the lamp. My skin went cold. "Don't be stupid," I muttered. "You don't believe in Bigfoot stuff." But the more I stared, the more that darker shadow behind my boy felt wrong. I grabbed my phone and pulled up the original digital file, zoomed in with my fingers. The pixels broke apart into colored squares, but that shape, that vertical mass, it held together somehow. Wider at the top, narrower at the bottom, like someone standing just inside the shadows, watching. I zoomed out, then back in. Same thing. My mouth went dry. The rain kept drumming. The lamp buzzed softly. And somewhere under the rain, I thought I heard 1, 2, 3 soft knocks, spaced like someone thinking about each one. The wind had turned sharp, whistling in that crack under the bedroom window. The clock by the bed blinked 1:37 in dull red. The only other sound was the old fridge cycling on and off, a low groan through the wall. I couldn't stop thinking about the photo. I'd taken my phone and blown it up again, dragging my fingers over the screen until the pixels turned into big colored squares. But that darker shape stayed somehow together. I told myself again, it's a shadow. It's nothing. Quit with the Bigfoot nonsense. Then I heard it. Knock. Pause. Knock. Longer pause. Knock. 3. On the far wall by the kitchen. Not loud, but hollow, like knuckles on old wood. The smell came next. Wet fur and dirt, like when a dog comes in from the rain, only heavier, pushing through the cracks in the cabin. My chest tightened. I sat up slow, every board creaking under me, sounding like a gunshot. I checked the loft ladder. Noah was curled under his blanket, breath warm and even. Wind, I whispered to myself. Boards shifting. Not Bigfoot. Not Bigfoot. I got out of bed and walked to the kitchen in bare feet, the floor icy against my soles. The window over the sink showed nothing but black glass and my own pale reflection. I pressed my face close, cupped my hands around my eyes. The porch light threw a weak circle on the deck. Beyond that, nothing. just the shape of trees against slightly less dark sky. The smell was fading, but I could still taste it in the back of my throat. Animal. Wild. I stood there for a long time, listening. The wind. The fridge. My own breathing. Nothing else. But I stayed awake until the sky turned that flat, colorless blue, waiting for 3 more knocks that never came. You know the way silence sounds when something's already gone? That morning the fog hugged the lake, muffling everything. Even the jays were quiet. I remember the way the wet grass felt under my boots, cold seeping through the laces, when I stepped off the porch. "Buddy? Come on in, it's snack time," I called. No answer. Just the faint slap of water on the stones. His yellow dump truck lay on its side near the edge of the yard, wheels half buried in the mud like it had been dropped mid-game. The little basket of pine cones he'd been collecting sat upright by the stump, still full. "Noah?" My voice cracked. The smell of wet wood and something else, musky like an animal had just passed through, hung in the air. I checked the outhouse, the shed behind the stacked firewood. The cabin creaked softly behind me, like it was listening. My heart was hammering now, hands shaking as I called his name louder. Down by the water, in the gray mud at the shore, I saw prints. Not clear like a plaster cast, but wide, long impressions. Bigger than my boot by a lot. Deeper at the heel. No tread, no claw marks. Just weight and shape pressed into soft ground. My first thought wasn't kidnapper or bear. It was that stupid word I hated. Bigfoot. And I hated myself for even thinking it as I started screaming my son's name into the fog. I ran to the tree line, stumbling over roots, calling until my throat was raw. The fog swallowed my voice. Nothing came back. I grabbed my phone from my pocket with shaking hands and dialed 911. It rang 4 times before someone picked up. You can hear police radios before you see the cars. That jittery static. 2 county deputies and 1 state trooper. Lights flashing red and blue in the wet branches. Boots on gravel. Radios chirping. A search dog whining in the back of an SUV. They did all the right things. Grid search. Names on clipboards. One of them asked about custody, drugs, anyone who might want to take the boy. The cabin smelled like wet officers, coffee, and my own fear. I showed them the lake prints, my hands shaking. Those weren't there yesterday. And I heard knocks, 3 knocks, and you think it's, what, a bear? The trooper asked. I swallowed. This was the moment I lost them. I keep thinking about that photo. There was, I don't know, a figure, like a Bigfoot, behind him. I know how it sounds, but the younger deputy snorted under his breath. "You and your Bigfoot people," he muttered, not quite quietly enough. The trooper's face went stone. "Sir, please don't muddy this with stories. Your boy wandered. That's what we're dealing with." They spread out into the timber with the dog. I followed until they told me to stay at the cabin in case Noah came back. I sat on the porch steps, wrapped in a blanket someone had given me, and watched them disappear into the trees. The radios faded. The fog thickened. Hours passed. They came back without him. "We'll expand the search tomorrow," the trooper said. His voice was softer now. "Try to get some rest." That night, after they'd gone and the dog's barking had faded into the trees, I sat alone at the table. The photo lay under the lamp, that dark shape behind Noah's little body. I zoomed on my phone again, tracing the line of that shadow. "I hate even using that word," I whispered, "but there's no other name for what I saw behind my boy. Bigfoot." And somewhere outside, barely audible under the rain on the roof, came 1, 2, 3 knocks, like an answer I didn't know how to give them back. By the 3rd day, the official search was pulling back. "We'll keep eyes out statewide," they said. "Kids turn up." But I'd seen their faces, the way they wouldn't say the words they were thinking. I couldn't sit in that humming cabin another second. So I printed the best version of the photo from my phone, folded it into my jacket pocket, grabbed a flashlight and a whistle, and stepped off the logging road into the timber. The forest was quiet in that heavy way, like the sound got soaked up by the moss. My boots sank into wet duff, squelching softly. Every few feet I stopped and listened, just water dripping from branches. My own breath. "Bigfoot," I said under my breath, surprised at myself. "If you're real, if you took him, please." The word felt different out there. Not a joke, not a rumor, more like I was calling to a neighbor whose name I barely knew. About a mile in, I found them. Another set of wide, deep impressions in the mud, heading uphill. No boot tread, no claw, just weight. I followed, my heart punching my ribs, repeating in my head, "It's just a weird person. It's just a weird person. Don't make it Bigfoot." The trail led through a stand of old cedars, then over a ridge. The impressions got fresher, water still seeping into the edges. Then, faint and distant, I heard it. Knock, knock, knock. 3, from somewhere higher up the slope, like someone talking in a language made of wood. I stopped breathing, stood perfectly still, listened, nothing else. Just the drip and creak of the forest. I kept climbing. The knocking had stopped by the time I broke out into a little clearing. The trees opened just enough to let a shaft of pale sun leak through, turning the mist into a slow-moving curtain. In the center of that clearing was a circle of stones, not big ones, just hand-sized rocks, stacked 3 high all the way around like a low ring. Inside it, on a bed of fresh pine needles, were things that did not belong to the forest. Noah's blue knit hat, a red plastic truck wheel, and one small, dirty sneaker with a tiny dinosaur on the side. My legs almost gave out. I dropped to my knees, fingers shaking as I touched the hat. It was dry, like it had been placed there recently, not dropped. The air smelled stronger up there, musky, rank, but not rotten, like wet fur and earth and something wild that wasn't used to. People. A low sound came from the tree line, not a growl, not a word. More like a long, trembling exhale pushed through a chest the size of a refrigerator. "Bigfoot," I breathed, before I could stop myself. It wasn't fear in that moment. It was being watched, evaluated, like something just past the trees was trying to decide if I was dangerous. Leaves rattled as if a massive hand brushed them. I stayed on my knees, palms open. "Please," I said to the trees, to the sound, to the word Bigfoot hanging between us. "He's just a kid." The only answer was the soft drip of water and my own heartbeat in my ears. But I left the stones untouched and backed away, because something about that circle felt like it wasn't mine to break. I memorized the spot, marked it in my head, then I turned and kept searching. They say the forest looks all the same, but you remember certain places forever. This ravine is burned into me. I'd followed more of those big impressions, down this narrow cut where water had carved a path after some storm. The mud sucked at my boots. Ferns brushed my knees, leaving them wet and cold. Up ahead, I saw something red. For a second, I thought my heart just stopped. Then it slammed back into gear so hard my vision went white at the edges. Noah! He was sitting at the base of a big cedar, red jacket filthy, cheeks streaked with dirt, clutching that same yellow dump truck to his chest. Eyes wide, but calm in this strange, distant way. Between us and him, at the edge of the trees, was a shape that didn't belong. I'm not going to give you some Hollywood version. I didn't see every hair or count fingers. It was more like the forest bulged. A tall, wide shadow against the trunks, darker than the trees even in the dim light, with a sense of height that made me feel 10 years old again. It shifted. I heard heavy breathing, and I smelled that same wet fur and earth smell like someone had opened a door to another world. My brain split in half. One side screamed run, the other was all, "That's a Bigfoot, that's a Bigfoot, God help me, that's a Bigfoot." Noah looked between me and the shadow, totally silent. "Buddy, come here," I said, voice barely more than air. The shadow stepped back, not away from Noah, away from me. One slow, heavy shift of weight, brush cracking under a foot I couldn't quite see. Almost like, this sounds insane, but like he was scared of what I might do. It was a Bigfoot, I'm telling you now. Into this little microphone, no question in my mind. but it was terrified too. For a second, nobody moved. The air held its breath. Then, from deeper in the trees, came 3 sharp knocks, closer and louder than I'd ever heard. Knock, knock, knock. The shadow turned toward the sound, then melted back into the timber, weight making the ground thud with each step. Only when he was gone did my boy finally start crying. I ran to Noah and scooped him up, feeling his small body shake against mine. He smelled like dirt and pine, and that same musky scent. I held him. So tight, I was afraid I'd hurt him, but I couldn't let go. You know that humming buzz you get in government buildings? Lights, old vents, copier machines, it all blends into this one nervous sound. The sheriff's office smelled like stale coffee and wet jackets. Papers shuffled. Phones rang now and then. I sat there with my hands clenched so tight around my phone my knuckles ached. Noah sat next to me, clutching his dump truck, eyes still far away. When they found us walking out of the woods, the deputies looked at me like I'd staged the whole thing. He must have just gotten turned around, one said. Lucky break. Lucky break. In the interview room, I laid out what I had. The original photo, zoomed in, that darker shape behind my son. Time-stamped. A second photo I'd taken of the stone circle and Noah's hat, wheel, and shoe inside it. Mud prints I'd photographed next to my boot for scale. And, shakier than I like to remember, a 30-second audio clip I'd recorded on my phone the night after finding him, standing on my dark porch light throwing that weak amber circle, recording the 3 deep knocks echoing from the tree line. I hit play. The room filled with that hollow sound. Knock, knock, knock. The sheriff's jaw tightened just a fraction. The deputies shifted. One of them crossed himself, quick, like he thought nobody saw. So let me get this straight, the sheriff said finally. You're telling me a Bigfoot carried your boy off, kept him alive for 2 days, and then, what, gave him back? I met his eyes. My voice came out flat. I am telling you a Bigfoot was there. I am telling you he was afraid of me. And I am telling you those knocks were not woodpeckers. He held my gaze for a long time. In the hallway, a printer whirred. Somebody laughed at a joke I couldn't hear. Then he reached out, stopped my hand before I deleted anything. Keep those, he said softly. And don't go showing them around town. People talk. They twist things. You proved enough to me. That's all that matters. On the drive back, with Noah asleep in the car seat and the wipers slipping back and forth, I realized I'd wanted the whole world to know I wasn't crazy. But the more I thought about that shadow stepping back from us, the fewer people I wanted saying the word Bigfoot at all. We didn't stay at the lake much longer. I told people the cabin was too isolated for a single dad, that driving hours for groceries was getting old, that I wanted Noah near schools, near people. All of that was true. What I didn't tell them was that every time the fridge kicked on in that cabin, I flinched, waiting for 3 hollow knocks to follow. That the smell of a wet dog on the porch made my hands shake. That I'd started leaving small baskets of apples at the tree line, like some ridiculous peace offering to a neighbor who never knocked on the door, only the walls. In Spokane, the sounds were different. Distant sirens, kids yelling in the next yard, the steady whoosh of cars on wet pavement. The porch light glowed a softer yellow. When people at work shared Bigfoot memes or joked about that Bigfoot country up by St. Helens, I laughed along. Yeah, plenty of Bigfoot stories out there, I'd say, sipping my coffee, checking the doors in my head. But at night, when Noah was finally asleep and the house settled with its own creaks, I'd pull out a shoebox from the back of the closet. Inside, the printed photo with the shadow, the shot of the stone circle, a little flash drive with the knock recording backed up 3 times. I could have sent that to some show, some forum. Let strangers tear it apart, argue over pixels. Every time, I closed the lid instead. Bigfoot kept him alive. I'd whisper to the dark, feeling insane and honest at the same time. I don't know why. I don't know how. But I owe him something. Then I'd lie awake, listening not to traffic, but to the memory of 3 knocks on cedar from miles and years away. So here we are, back to the heater hum and the rain or snow tonight, tapping at the window behind this little recorder. Noah's 13 now, taller than me if he stands on his toes. He doesn't remember much from those 2 days, or says he doesn't. If you ask, he just shrugs and tells you he dreamed about a tall, warm wall that smelled like a wet blanket and pine needles. We don't say the word Bigfoot in the house, not out loud. I still keep the photos, the audio. The sheriff retired last year. We nod if we pass in town, but we never talk about Bigfoot or those 3 knocks we both heard in that little interview room, echoing off government paint and old drywall. Sometimes late, when the building's quiet and the heater kicks off, the silence rings in my ears just like the forest used to. I'll be sitting at this table, light a soft amber pool on some unpaid bill, and I swear I hear it again. Knock, knock, knock. Not on my walls anymore. Just somewhere in the back of my mind, on the inside of my skull, a reminder, a calling card. And when I say the word Bigfoot now, I say it low, like I'm talking about a man who once did a hard, strange kindness for me and my son and paid for it by becoming a secret I have to carry. I know what people think when they hear Bigfoot. I know how this all sounds, but the photo is real. The audio is real. My boy is real. And last night, when the heater shut off and the whole apartment went still, I heard those 3 knocks again.